stars be with you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Energetic Principles podcast. We are back here today for Cancer Solstice season. And what better guest to join me than fellow Cancerian Spencer Michaud? Thanks for joining me again on the podcast, Spencer.
Hey, it's great to be here, Mel. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we just two crabs in a room. Well, separate rooms, but I just thought that it's always nice to have the sensibility of the sun personality when we're talking about these overall seasons, because we live it every day. Yeah.
That's the
What's
truth. For better or for
every,
worse.
I know. Every day we're crabs. Every day we're crabs, and we are at the whim of the moon, which is always a big thing for Cancerian energy. And depending on if you're a Cancer out there, of course, what's the number one thing you want to be looking at? That moon. Not just in the sky, but in your own chart. What flavor of Cancer are you? I'm a Capricorn flavor. What about you, Spencer?
My moon's in Taurus on the midheaven, so I'm a Taurus moon flavor, I guess you could say.
So okay. So we're two earthy flavors coming to I guess bring down the water to in practical measure here today. But before we get started, in case you have not heard of Spencer before, even though he's been on this podcast quite a few times, Spencer, share a little bit about yourself.
Well, I study Hellenistic astrology, and I have a podcast on YouTube, Spencer Michaud Astrology, that you can check out. I do weekly live streams where I look at the lunations in particular. I look at the new and the full moons and do monthly forecasts as well. I studied with the Nightlight astrology crew and with various other teachers as well. I'm a Cancer Sun, Taurus Moon, Leo Ascendant. So I'm utilizing that Cancer Sun from the 12th house, but that 10th house Moon keeps pulling me into some kind of visibility, kicking and screaming. So I think, it's fun though, and I love talking about this kind of thing. And I have a special interest in the decans, so I've done some work and research on the decans, building on the work of people like Austin Coppock and T. Susan Chang, and I just really love the mythology behind all of it as well. So just seeing how all of those things manifest in our life, and just trying to make astrology palpable and, come at it with hopefully a sense of kindness, which is a theme that one of my favorite astrology authors, Joy Usher, talks about for Cancerian in particular, as a climate of kindness, I think is what she calls it.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I feel like I strive to have the climate of kindness, but there are other things in my chart that, throw in a little Virgo, throw in the Sun, Moon square, and Pluto.
Well, we
And
all fall short of the glory. I mean, that's one of the things. Honestly, a great quote that I thought I kind of set aside here for Cancer season, I thought would be a great way to open us up with is Liz Green from Mythic Astrology. Great book. And she talks about the Cancerian vibe. And she says on page 15, lunar compassion is not flowery, but is a ruthless force of nature, through which emerging life is protected and preserved. So we are friendly, but underestimating the Cancerian energy is a mistake that a lot of people make, I think. So I think it's important when you're coming into Cancer season to have this kind of kindness and this aspiring towards that, but try not to take the Cancerian kindness for weakness in people's lives. I think that's really important. I think we can be underestimated sometimes, and I think that's a mistake.
well, I mean, the crab does have claws, doesn't it?
That's very true. Very
The
true.
crab has claws, and it also has a protective shell. So by nature, we are protective, hence the mama bear energy. And maybe, I think when you were reading that, it made me think of tough love and how sometimes tough love is needed. because it is like a truer love, because you really do care about someone or want the best for someone or something, or even yourself. And in order to do that, it can't be lax and flowery and like, oh, let me coddle and cater to you. It's no, like, no, this is, it has some
And
sort of,
I
yeah.
think instincts are a part of this that are really important too. Like Cancer and the moon are an instinctual awareness. So a lot of this protectiveness isn't always conscious. It arises from like a depth, protection of the life force itself. And the life force kind of inspires, people to go to great lengths to protect life. So I think that coming into alignment with that, with the body in particular and the instincts that arise through our bodies, is a really important theme for Cancer season. We're not always conscious of what we're doing. There is definitely some id qualities involved versus the ego qualities, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you think about Cancer, we're coming back to the moon energy. And so it comes from this deeply, I guess we could say instinctual, we could say subconscious, reactionary.
Mhm.
It comes from a place that is very deep and subjective.
And cyclical, right?
Yes, yes.
You know, so
Yeah.
our light is one that waxes and wanes, and you know, the inconsistency that sometimes gets associated with Cancer is actually very consistent if you know what you're looking for, right?
And that goes for the Cancerian themselves, because
Sure.
when you feel like you're on the, the ebb and flow and the up and down and the roller coaster, it can feel like you're all over the place. But if there's one thing any Cancerian could do, and really anybody, especially if you consider yourself a more emotional than not person, is to track your cycles, track the moon, see when the moon hits those sensitive parts of your chart. See when the moon's in particular signs that might be have contention with your own moon, or those difficult areas, and you're going to see that those twists and turns are not random. They are on time. You can expect them, and yeah, it's every time the moon goes into Gemini, it activates my Mars and my
Mhm.
Mars Saturn square and my nodes. I know, I'm like, okay, I'm probably gonna be in a shitty mood.
The best way I've come to think about the moon is as a music box cylinder that
Mm,
has like little spikes on it, little tines that strike the keys of your own personal planetary arrangements. So think about how quickly that cylinder will spin, and it's just activating those planets over and over again, and activating planets in the sky to be able to interact with your own planets. So it's really fascinating to see that. I love that cyclical cylinder type of metaphor with that.
I love that. It's like your rhythm with the moon is constantly playing the same tune. It's
Right?
just what part of the song are you at, you know?
It's true. It's
Yeah,
very true.
that's a great analogy. I love that. And
But
so,
here's the other
yeah,
thing
go
I'll say
ahead.
about that. So you were talking about knowing when your Mars is being activated. So I know that in my particular chart, I have a square with my partner's. My sun is squared. My Mars is squared her sun, and I know that whenever it's at 28 degrees of a mutable sign, that square. I know that whenever the moon is hitting 28 degrees of a mutable sign, we have the potential for an argument, right? So because I understand that the potential is there, then you give each other more space. You try not to let little things irritate you or things like that. That's the pronoia, or the foresight that astrology can bring us, is when we understand that those things are going to be triggered, giving each other more space, more grace.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're literally shedding the light on the moon,
Yeah.
because the more you know, the less likely you're going to operate from the automatic. And so, Yeah, no one wants to fight with their partner, but if you know there's a tender moment, I think that's when I have that Mars Saturn square for me, because then my partner has my Mars is very conveniently on his descendant.
There you go.
So, we all get lit, and he's got Saturn on his ascendant. So we all
Sure.
get there basically 8 to 9 degrees of mutable, like take a break
Mm.
from one
Mm.
another. Like that
Right.
is do something,
And that's
go.
totally
Yeah.
fine. You know, every relationship has those types of, things baked into it. Every single moment of every single day isn't 100% bliss. And if it is, then, more power to you. You've got an amazing relationship, but it's just not realistic. We all have times when we're feeling more or less at our best, and allowing ourselves the space to be all of those things in a relationship, and not like, you know, blow the whole thing up when we know one part of it is a little bit challenging. That's something I've had to learn, watching my parents go through cycles like that, realizing that not every single time when you're relating to someone is going to be happy. And that doesn't mean that the relationship isn't worthwhile. And we'll see themes like that come up, especially in the first decan of Cancer with that Two of Cups. It's a very relational decan. So learning how to navigate those relationship dynamics, I think, is another, Cancerian theme as well.
Absolutely. We're talking about water after all. And what is water prone to do? It merges. It's connective. It's water signs are here to relate. I mean, everyone's here to relate, but water signs in particular have a very strong relational quality. And as has been said about water signs, and I mean, believe Demetra George is writing about this in uh her book, that why can't I think of the name of it right now? But anyways, there's a dependency with water signs. And so and what are we going to be dependent on? Probably another person, something outside of ourselves. And so hence there's this other connective quality. And so when we have to depend on other people, there's these layers of dependence and how that looks, because certain dependence is not healthy. And then there's other dependence, which is like, I need you, and I need our interaction, and I need our resources to help me be my best person without me fully relying on you and expecting things from you that either are unrealistic or very what's the word I'm looking for? Well, it has escaped me, but yes.
I mean, you think about the moon too as a collector of light and a reflector of that light. So a lot of the Cancerian energy is collecting people's energy and emotions, and then it has to go somewhere. And oftentimes, as a Cancerian sun and Mercury, you'll feel a certain way, and you're like, why? Where is that coming from? I don't even know why I'm feeling this. And you've absorbed the energy from people in the room. This is another reason why I think the Cancer archetype talks about having that hard external shell, because sometimes we have to create healthier boundaries with other people so that we're not just absorbing negativity all the time as well. We can absorb people's good feelings, but it's very painful when we're constantly feeling overburdened with everyone's negative feelings, especially as a nurturer who wants to alleviate people's suffering. When you're just absorbing suffering all the time, it's just like, oh, I can't feed everybody, I can't help everyone, I can't give everyone a hug. It's kind of the you're having to navigate a lot of those emotional waters for sure.
I think what you're saying brings up a wonderful point about the purpose of Cancer, and we talk about that essentially self-care, right?
Right.
Care. We talk about care, like care is the overall, but really when it comes to Cancer, it's about learning self-care and preservation of the self. And it's not about taking everybody else's stuff in. It's not about taking the world in. We have that gift, I guess we could say, because the gift of empathy and compassion is a wonderful gift to have. But the true light of Cancer is learning how to care for oneself. And it's not. I wouldn't say that it's natural. At least over here, I feel like this is something I have to learn over time. I don't know about you,
Well,
Spencer.
and to integrate our own divinity. I think I say that in reference to a story that Liz Green talks about with Achilles and Thetis, his mother, where, you know, she's dipped his ankle. Like, Achilles was one of the quintessential Cancerian mythological archetypes, right? He was a reluctant hero that was hid away from war and wasn't inspired to have a head-on confrontation with life until he's experienced deep emotional loss and grief. And I think that's another Cancerian quality, is sometimes we will avoid getting involved in conflicts until we really feel something personally, deeply emotional, especially through grief and loss. The other thing that that story really helps me to understand is that Cancerians actually have a perfectionist side to them, where they're either projecting, because like Tethys wanted to keep her son immortal, we can project our feelings of immortality onto a child, onto a creative work, to the point where we can feel like if something that comes out of us is not divine, we get dissatisfied. So I don't know if you experienced this when you were an artist. I know that I very much did. A lot of the times for a Cancerian person, especially you and I that have our son's fairly close to the fixed star Sirius, which we should talk a little bit about with that new moon that's coming up. But that is a drive to have something live beyond you, that to create something that is immortal. So like, for example, you and I are we like throwback stuff, you know, we like timeless art, music, etc. And when we as artists, I don't say when we were artists, we are artists. As artists, you know, my feeling was that I had to create something that would stand the test of time. And that is a lot of pressure to put on yourself as an artist. So it's very easy to become discontented, to become frustrated, and also to project that expectation onto others, onto a partner, onto a child. The story I like to tell that is not my finest moment as a parent, but it was a great learning experience. I have a daughter who's in college now, but she decided she wanted to become a swimmer very late in her adolescence. And I was like, all right, if you're gonna do this, we're gonna do it. We're gonna, you know, in my mind, I'm like, all right, she wants to, you know, be a swimmer. We're gonna take her to the Olympics. You know what I mean? Like literally, she has to become an Olympian. And I became a little bit like the stage dad for a period of time. And it came from a place of deep caring, where I wanted her to feel joy and success and self-esteem. But there were moments during that journey together where I had to catch myself and be like, I am pushing way too hard. I need to stop projecting my expectations of divinity and immortality onto this other person and let her be who she's going to be rather than who I want her to be, right? And so this is another challenge with Cancerian energy, like whether you have children or whether you're in a relationship or whether you're a creative person, projecting that is one of the dangers rather than integrating it. I think the other part of that story that's interesting is this desire to return to the womb, this desire to return to a divine oneness. And there's a great longing in Cancerian energy to return home, right? We talk about Cancer as the home. And I think that there's always this, it's, you call it nostalgia, but it's really a longing for just safety, for security, for divine union. And I'll tell you that was a feeling when I was a younger person. It's still present today, but I'm at least aware of what it is on some level. That longing as a teenager or as a young adult was very strong. And, you know, that's where you get the mopey, pouty Cancerian type of archetype, right?
Yeah, I definitely resonate with the longing for home. I mean, if you're a dreamer, chances are you have some sort of reoccurring dream. And one of my main reoccurring dreams, more so the entirety of my adult life, and maybe actually post Saturn return when I think about it, is trying to get home in my dreams. And I will inevitably be lost, or certain things will get in the way, or I'll ask people to help me and they can't help me and I am literally on my own. And in some dreams, I'm almost there. In some dreams, I have the capacity to knowing that I'm on the path. And then other times it's so far away that I wake up and I am I'm sad, I'm frustrated. And so longing for that home. And I think you're absolutely right with just the safety and security component. I think about when I was a kid, I was one of those kids, bless my heart, who I could not sleep over at other people's houses. Every time I tried, there would be the, 11 p.m. phone call to mom to be like, can you come pick me up? I can't even,
Sure.
I mean, one
Yeah.
time I was actually at this speaks to my Uranus on the ascendant, trining my sun, right? So they put us all to bed. It's totally dark in the house. And I'm just freaked out. And I'm like, I can't do this. And so I'm tiptoeing through the house trying to get a phone. And the dad comes out and he just looks at me. He goes, go back to bed. And I'm like, ah! And I run, go back to bed. And I lay there and I'm like, to give about like 5-10 minutes. I'm like, no. And so I had a secret mission that I waited. I literally slunk through the house, got to this other room, got on the phone, whispered it to my mom, got my stuff, went out, sat on the side of the road in the middle of the night for her to pick me up. And basically in the morning, these people are like, what happened to this kid? Because I literally, I was an escape
Wow.
artist. I was out of there. But nothing
Yeah.
was going to separate me from my home and essentially my mother, right? And
Sure,
so
yeah.
that bond that you're speaking of here, especially in childhood, or at least for me, I think anybody who's Cancerian, whether it's the sun, moon, rising, etc., or a ruler of the rising there, the bond to the family, in particular the mother, is very potent no matter what the relationship is.
Yeah. Yeah, there's testing that happens. For example, if we look at the second 10-degree section of Cancer, between 10 and 20 degrees of Cancer, that's called the walled garden in Austin Coppock's 36 Faces book. So it's about, I was thinking about this with your story with the sleepover, because he compares that decan to being hothouse flowers, where we only thrive in a certain set of circumstances, which I could very much relate to. But I think that the wrestling with the mother, especially in that decan, there's a spirit in that decan. It's Hercules. And Hercules was literally the glory of Hera, but Hera was testing him. She was his stepmother, basically, where she was jealous of Zeus's paramours, right? His infidelity. And she put him through trials. She put him through labors. And I think a lot of Cancerian folks, some of them have good childhoods, but many, many, many of us have challenging childhoods where we didn't necessarily feel safe. We didn't feel secure. And as adults, we're trying to integrate that feeling into our life and provide it not only for ourselves, but for others because of that empathy. If we're on path, I mean, every single sign has light and dark sides. And Cancerian can feel so stressed about their safety and security that they can be monsters at certain points too, like myself included. I've had times where I've felt so unsafe that I was a real dick, and so I think that, but it comes from a place of, I think sometimes it comes from a place of fear and wanting to bring that safety into our environment. So I think paying attention to our body and our instincts, like especially our gut and intuition. A crab is a prey animal, so all of their senses have to be heightened to be able to survive. And I think as Cancerian folks, all of our senses are extremely heightened to the point where we can infer danger even when it may not exist, because we're always trying to be on alert for it. So I think that it's important to communicate in whatever way is important to you. Cancers communicate a lot through body language, but I think that not everybody communicates that way. And clearing up assumptions with your partners, with your family, et cetera, is really important, especially when there's a big stack ups in Cancer. A lot of assumptions can be made in your relationships because you're like, you looked funny, your face looked weird when you said this, or you said in this weird little tone, and like, and I think it's important to seek clarity, from other people rather than assume, because I know for me personally, as a Cancerian person, I have a very active imagination. I can create entire scenarios out of very little communicative information. And that's a gift as an artist, but it's also sometimes a burden within relationships. And oftentimes, someone did not mean the slight or something, and we just have to kind of like get clarification.
Man, so yes, don't assume. For agreements, don't make
Right.
assumptions here,
Totally.
right?
Totally.
I think one of the main things to pull out there, the Cancerian imagination obviously is very strong, but so is the ability for Cancers to take things personally because
yeah.
of the sensitivity, because of the assumptions, because of the imagination. There's, we think about Leo, where everything revolves around the Leo, but the moon is basically reflecting the sun. So it is getting that same thing. And many Cancerians believe that everything revolves around them too and their emotions.
Sure.
And so a lot of times, because of the subjective nature of the moon and Cancer energy, that reading into something and that imagination and relating it back to the self and that sense of safety and security, right? Because we're going to take it in, it's going to be a problem because there's an element that's not safe there. And so how do we not take it personally? How do we not make assumptions? Like, this is because people don't care. Like, that's the thing. We care so much that we assume that other people are.
That's the key right there.
Yeah.
That's the key. Like, yeah, other people, for better or for worse too. Sometimes people don't care in a way that where we don't have to feel as sensitive about something we said or did,
Yes.
etc. Or people don't care as much as we do for the good qualities of that, and we have to understand that as well and not take offense that not everybody is a natural nurturer, right? Not everybody is concerned with promoting healthy growth in the other person. Some people are really competitive, and that's like something that is a harsh reality sometimes for the Cancerian mindset. One other little thing with that, piggybacking off of what you're talking about, the centralization that both Leo and Cancer, I think, have, is think about how strong the sun is in the northern hemisphere at Cancer season. And it's literally the solstice. It's the height of the sun's power at those points. And I believe that there's some research that suggests that the sun is a co-ruler of Cancer. I'm not sure exactly where I think it was Alan White, someone of that nature, who is a Project Hindsight type person. I have to check on that, but it would make sense that at the height of summer, a strong, regardless of the archetypes, that there's still a strong egocentric nature to the Cancerian vibe.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense when you just think about the sun and the moon. These are the most personal planets that we could possibly have. And granted, it's not the sun, but it's the moon. And arguably the moon, for a lot of people, is more strong than the sun is because it's natural. It's instinctive. It's not something we have to work to be conscious of. So we operate from this place. So it makes a lot of sense in what we're talking about here.
And it's cardinal, right?
That's true.
I mean, I don't know about you, but one of my secret superpowers is that I have had the ability in the past to make everyone in the room feel what I was feeling, for better or for worse. And that was a great gift as a musician. But
yes.
sometimes
but not
it's not good.
interpersonally.
Right. If you're unhappy, I call it the Cancerian cloud. Like, this cloud follows you around and you're just going to, like, it's like a skunk. That's one of my animal guides, is the skunk. So I have to be careful of leaking that energy out into the world and whatnot. And to make sure that if I'm utilizing my emotional energy for good rather than like emotional terrorism, right? Because that is one of the negative parts of Cancerian life is when we don't feel good, man, we're a real bummer to be around. We can be real Debbie Downers.
And I think sort of the core of that essence of what you're saying from that angle, and then also the sensitivity from others, is the Cancerians' reflective quality in general. So Cancerians are always going to reflect. We're either going to be reflected on by others and take that in, or we're going to have our own thing and it's going to be reflected back to us by the people that we then influence. And so there is this, yeah. And it's interesting to think about just reflection in general, because Cancer tends to be very, it imitates. And that's, I don't know if you've noticed that as a Cancerian too, like
Oh
this
yeah.
quality,
Oh
you'll
yeah.
get around other people, and for better or worse, even if it's as, the simple as mimicking someone else's phrases or keywords, or taking on like their style of speech. Or I was just telling Spencer how I noticed that I say, so much. I have this filler word that I'm always saying, and I'm like, where did I get that from? And then I
Right.
realized that I had a partnership for 8 years with a Gemini rising, who always said, like through everything. And I feel like I had never said that in my life. And after 8 years of being with that person, now I'm central. So it's like you pick it up in that kind of imitating, and you don't realize you're doing it. At least I
Sure.
don't realize I'm doing it, but
I mean,
it's to connect and to bond and to be
oh,
like,
absolutely.
right?
I mean, think about how much of a solvent water is, right, as an element.
Yes.
So water dissolves the boundaries between people, and I think, many of the water signs have the ability to do that, dissolving the boundaries between people. And also, water needs a container, and sometimes we tend to form to the containers that we're around. That's why I think anybody that is water centric or water heavy in their chart needs to be very careful about who they surround themselves with, because it's very easy for them to conform to those standards that are being set in the group. It's also important, I think, especially as a Cancerian person, to have some solitude, to really take some time for yourself to know what is your true feelings versus what is the feelings of those around you in the room. I journal every morning, and that helps me to kind of dump everything out of my brain, out of my heart, and be like, okay, I was feeling really weird about this situation, but why? And what was it about this? Or I was feeling really good about this. What was this influence that was coming? So I think that's another part of it. And I think a lot of the times when Cancerians are truly feeling challenged or feel sad or bad, we tend to go, I like to call it the cave of unreachability, right? Where like, some other people get really blustery, but Cancers, they just check out. Like I find that when I'm very upset, I get cold, and it's very hard for me to even form words. I get very distant. Do you experience this in your life as well?
Yes, sometimes if I'm not heated up and the Gemini side of me doesn't want to like go in and
Sure.
debate something,
Right.
there is this sense of, I just want to kind of be left alone. Or if someone puts me on the spot about something that I'm not ready to talk about or don't have the words for yet. I mean, Cancer, after all, is, a mute sign. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there,
Totally.
I do kind of just go cold, and I don't have anything to say. Sometimes I'm like that in confronting other people's emotions when they're having a very strong emotional reaction, not necessarily to me, but to life, and I'm witnessing it. I don't have much to contribute. And I think that might sometimes for me have to do with my Capricorn moon, because I'm like, oh, as a joke, I'm like, don't, that train wreck is not stopping here, kind of thing.
Hmm.
But, bless their hearts. But sometimes I just don't have anything to give that. And I don't know what to do in that moment. And so what happens is I don't say anything, and I do sort of go cold, not on purpose, but because it's almost like there's a part of me that's frozen in that moment. And I'm like,
Sure.
I don't know what to say or do, or so it's safer to do nothing.
Right.
You just stop.
Yeah, retreating into that shell of safety, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that as we grow, we can learn when it's appropriate to retreat and when we need to become involved. I think that's another lesson to learn if you have Cancer heavy in your chart, is when is it appropriate for you to be involved, and when should you hold back? There's other archetypal themes of being a little bit too involved in people's lives, and knowing that was another parenting lesson that I had to learn, was knowing when to let go. Like those crab claws, they when they attach to something, you almost have to rip it off, rip your arm off to let go of it. So letting go is not an easy Cancerian trait. We'll hang on for dear life, and that's life shows you that loss is part of it, and that's something that, as a Cancerian with a Taurus moon, death wasn't something I was super comfortable with, because this is like the fertile sign. This is about life and nurturing and helping things grow into fruition. One of the things I was looking at this morning through my notes was thinking about Cancer and the way that they spoke about it as the gate of man, or the gate of the human soul coming into a body, right? As the ascendant of the Thema Mundi and the connection of spirit and body. So it's sometimes foreign to Cancerian folks having to deal with loss and death and come to terms with that. But I think it's a lesson we all have to face at some point.
Yeah, there's one thing that's for certain, is life, change, death. It's the cycle. It's back to kind of what we were talking about with the cycle of things in general. And that's just the natural cycle of life and death and life and death. And I mean, literal death, of course, but also proverbial deaths. And so as something waxes, something will too wane. And so that's just the nature. And it's all well and good when it's waxing. But when it's waning, the claws come out. And I always tell people that have strong Cancerian energy, it's like, imagine a crab that is in the ocean, and it's on a rock, and it's grasping it, and the waves are just battering it, left and right, and it's doing everything within its power and its energy to hang on. But if it just let go and it just let itself be washed with the sea, it would be effortless, and it would be taken where essentially it needs to go, rather than exerting all that force. Which I think this is a good time to maybe talk about the tarot just a little bit too, when we think about the nature of the sign of Cancer, and the major being the Chariot, right? And so here we have this drive and this like sort of like impenetrable force to go after ambition. I don't even know if we've talked about like the ambitious side of Cancer. Some of the most successful people on this planet, especially monetarily speaking, are Cancers, probably because of that drive for security. But that's that tenaciousness that Cancerians have. And I like we have a different version of the Chariot in our Tarot of Her deck. That's more about, I like to think about it as when we're really driven towards something, there's this level of devotion that takes place to the mission itself. And when we are devoted and we're on it, no matter, like what our emotions, as long as we can kind of like train them in and stay on that horse, there's no telling what we can't accomplish and do.
You know what's cool about the Chariot? If you look at famous Cancerians, think about how many of them literally have the shell that they travel with. Like, I'm thinking of David Hasselhoff from Knight Rider, right? He literally had a symbiotic relationship with his car. If you're familiar with that show from the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Vin Diesel, okay, Fast and the Furious series, right? Harrison Ford, he and the Millennial Falcon, right?
Well, doesn't Elon Musk have the Tesla and the rockets?
Yeah, probably, right? So, and just talking about other folks like Mike Tyson, for example, he really embodies that Achilles archetype. There was a story with Mike Tyson where he was kind of a shy kid, and he would raise pigeons. Like he lived in I believe New York, and he had like pet pigeons that he was raising. And some neighborhood kids were started bullying him, and they killed one of his pigeons. And
No.
he remembered that was his first fight, because he was like, oh, he just like tried to beat the crap out of this kid, basically. And he wasn't very big at that time either, but it was kind of the being moved to action and engaging head on with life due to great grief, and trying to reconcile that, and also to protect something that was important to you. So if you're trying to get a Cancer in your life moving, you have to be able to reach them in a way that is personal, like, and emotional. If you're trying to be too detached and too like rational about it, we can ignore that for like forever, you know, because we'll just stay in with that bubble of safety. And that, you know, it's something that to be able to move towards progress, you have to engage the emotions first during this season and with those placements. So, you know, if you're dealing with these kind of things, finding something that's personally meaningful for you, I think is really, that really inspires you on a deep level, emotional level, can be a great way to get out there and get moving. Because I don't know about you, but like as a Cancerian type, like navigating capitalism and the competition that comes through some of those challenges it doesn't feel natural. And like the relationships sometimes that it requires, as far as the challenging relationships that we sometimes are situations we're forced into through this type of economic system. It feels icky sometimes. And it's been a constant struggle, I think, with as a Cancer 12th house sun and Mercury, I guess.
That
That's
makes sense.
probably part of that too.
Yeah.
But you're talking about wealth building with Cancer, so
Yeah. And I feel we're essentially looking at the other side of the street with Capricorn there. And that's why we have that kind of polarity that comes forth with that energy, and why it might feel a little off, or might feel like, I don't know, that's not really Saturn cardinal Earth. I don't know, you're not really my bag. I think I like this moon business over here, where I'm more motivated to go after what I care, not what I want to kind of acquire and have dominion over. And like and I feel like I'm naturally more attuned to it, only because I have a Capricorn full moon. So I definitely lived very much in that world, especially when I was younger. But I find that over time, as I grow into my sun, and not sort of what I was talking about before with this more instinctual, what we're kind of born with, this lunar quality, I value that side of the street much more than I do the Capricorn systems and structures that we have going on here. So,
and both are necessary, right? I mean,
yeah.
that's the thing too. Like every part of the zodiac plays an integral role in the whole. So I like to think about the chart as something that is a set of influences, and we don't always necessarily have to follow those influences and those impulses, even if we have to move outside of our comfort zone. Like maybe we as Cancerian types might feel better in our garden than we would like at the New York Stock Exchange, and like trying to go that kind of that competitive type of environment. But I do think that it's incredible what people can do when they become aware of their tendencies and get more comfortable taking risks outside of their normal character as well. And I want to say one more thing about the life and death cycle. Working in my garden has really taught me to accept death. Like when I've been doing a lot of native pollinator habitat restoration, like taking out my grass and like putting in native pollinator plants. And I got really depressed last year when the garden started to die and when it went dormant. But seeing the cyclical return of those same plants that I thought some of them were dead for good, and seeing the joy that comes seeing them return, and that dormancy versus just completely losing something, I think is an important lesson. And in learning how to let things rest and accept those dormant periods, that not every single cycle is about growth, and exponential, unlimited, unchecked growth. We have to rest to be able to repair the soil, to gain energy for the next cycle. So that's kind of that. We're going to talk a lot about those full moons, like that you
Yes.
live, right?
That I live every day.
Yeah, right.
So I'll have some insight there. So basically, we have done a an in-depth treatment on what it's like to be a Cancer, but we can take those overarching themes that we talked about, such as the cycles and the emotionality and the sensitivity and the security and the protection, possibly the defensiveness, but also the ambition and the care and the love, and the overall factor that there's no way to get away from the moon and its influence when we have Cancer involved. And we're going to take
Right.
all of that and we're going to put it into this year's Cancer solstice season, which, when to piggyback on what Spencer was just saying about the life coming back into the garden, in the northern hemisphere, this is the start of summer. This is the ripeness at the sun at its full, its fullest extent. This is when we are hopefully enjoying our summer vacation and out there splashing around in the pool and going to the beach if you happen to be lucky to live on the shores. So there's a lot of life, there's a lot of connectivity, there's a lot of joy, there's a lot of wonderful things that come in Cancer season. So now this Cancer season is a little charged for a couple reasons. Spencer was just talking about these full moons plural. What do you mean? Well, it's one of those special times where we are going to have not one, but two full moons during Cancer season. We'll have one right when it starts and right when it ends. So we get two Capricorn full moons. We're also starting the season under the Gemini new moon cycle, which had its own, that square to Saturn in Pisces. There's a lot of that essentially. Well, Mars wasn't in Taurus yet, but there's a lot going on in that new moon. We're gonna have cardinal quarters. This is when life is starting and pivoting and moving to the next zone. We've got Saturn and Neptune stationing. I mean, that's big news that we're going to talk about. We have Mercury entering its shadow to eventually go retrograde in Leo season. And we got Venus, who's going to be in Cancer and Leo, and we got Mars, who's going to be in Taurus and Gemini, and we have, last but not least, a lot of Pluto activation. So Spencer, that's I feel like we got a lot to talk about here. We probably should dive in. What do you think?
Ground to cover. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so let's go ahead. If you're watching the video, we're going to go ahead and share the chart so that we can break down all those fun things that I was just talking about. You see the chart all right, Spencer?
I can, yes, thank you.
Okay, so all right, well, we start with the solstice begins on June 20th, 2024. I actually have this 4:51 p.m. Eastern time. So I have this set for Washington right now because it is a cardinal ingress. So it might behoove us to look at the chart for like 2 seconds to talk about just the nature of the ingress itself. But it's we do have to point out the fact that literally like an hour or two before the sun moves into Cancer, it makes a square to that Neptune. That's at 29 and 53 minutes of Pisces, dangling on the edge. So what do you think about this Neptunian sort of arrival into Cancer season?
One of the greatest insights I've had about the transition from Gemini to Cancer season is thinking about it in terms of having to let go of one pathway to be able to infuse our love, energy, nurturing into something that's our highest priority. So I really, because you talk about the death of one twin in the Castor and Pollux myth and the sacrifice that the other twin had to make as sharing some of his immortality so the other could live again. So I do think that there is something, as we record this, we're heading into a Mercury Cazimi tomorrow, Friday, and we are going to be faced with a choice of letting something go so that we can, infuse our love, attention, and energy into a highest priority. Now, with the square to Neptune, that could be a little bit confusing. That could, trying to figure out what our priorities actually are, what the most important thing is, could be a little disorientating right before Cancer season. So I think that third decan of Pisces is really about what are you willing to sacrifice for your dream. So there might be a tension between our desire to achieve a very important emotional, spiritual dream, crusade, etc. That's a Mars ruled decan, for example, and how many things we can actually do. And keep in mind too, Saturn was in the overcoming square to all of those Gemini planets, saying, hey, you probably don't want to overestimate your ability. You need to surrender to some of these things, and you might not have all the information that you need yet to move forward. A small little aside story with this is when I was digging my garden and planting my garden this year, I literally dug up about 700 pounds of walking path slabs from the garden right as I was ready to put everything in. I was like, oh, surprise, here's like a bunch of Saturnian rocks under the ground to dig out. So I think that as we've transitioned into Gemini to Cancer season, we might start to be accepting of some of those obstacles and working within those limitations rather than feeling like, oh, we're failing or something because we haven't been able to work through it.
Yeah, I feel like there's this level of accepting accepting the limits, accepting the the obstacles. I mean, mainly because we have, obviously, if we're looking at this Cancer ingress, we're like, what's going on with the moon? We've talked so much about the moon, right? So we have to put our practice what we preach right here. And we have this Sagittarius moon that is moving to a square with Saturn in the ingress chart, which you think about just the overall season. So there's something to be said about this summer season or winter if you're in the the southern hemisphere, where there is this moon Saturn flavor. So it's not going to be necessarily a walk on the beach, I guess we could say. But there are wonderful things about this entire, summer season that does have us in this Jupiterian granted, we're feeling the moon Saturn, but these are both Jupiter signs, and Jupiter over there in Gemini now. And we talk about Jupiter being its detriment there, but at the same time, it's like, I love a detriment planet. Maybe it's because I got the moon at detriment, but it's because it really speaks to the ability to change or walk away from things or leave things behind that you can't uphold or that you don't have the resource for anymore. And so having those, moments of those kind of reality checks is, I think, a wonderful thing, because like you were saying, Spencer, we can't do it all. We can't take every element of our past and who we've ever been and everything and take it with us and continue to build upon it.
Right.
No, we don't have the bandwidth for that, right? So I guess that's a good question to ask yourself going into Cancer season is, what do you have the bandwidth for? And if you don't have it for that, then that's where that Neptunian energy can come in, and you can just like let it wash out to sea and say goodbye.
And Jupiter does have a little bit of dignity in that
That's true.
area. It has its rulership by face or decan. So
and triplicity. It has some triplicity there too.
Yeah. So we probably have options, right? We probably definitely have the ability to be flexible. That decan is associated with the Eight of Swords, where you have a figure that's sort of paralyzed by too much analysis or too many options, paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
So I think that, it's fascinating to see this moon Saturn square here, because that area of the zodiac in Sagittarius, I think often speaks towards, almost like we've been in a fight and we are still holding our ground and we're trying to find courage. Our mettle has been tested. So there might be some tests this summer of like our willpower and how that fits in with the greater divine plan. And I think it's a question of movement and taking action versus surrendering. I think that's what I'm seeing with that arrangement there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And to go back to what you're saying about the options, yeah,
Mm,
there's going to be no shortage of options. The
right.
question is, which is the right one? Which do you have the stamina? What do you have the stamina for?
Yeah.
What do you have? What do you truly have the skill for? We think about the Saturn, just the whole Pisces story, and Saturn being in Pisces and eventually going to conjunct Neptune, at the beginning of Aries, like just in the terms of much longer cycles, especially thinking about Pisces energy closing out the story of the zodiac.
Hmm.
We are still, I know we're kind of like, ever since pandemic life in 2020, we're like, when is this transition going to end? And we're like,
Yeah.
no, we are just in this copious amounts of transition for a while, for just that's just the nature of how we're evolving as people, and all entities on the planet right now.
Sure.
But I think, and so having a little grace within the occasional uncertainties within the options. And if you do find yourself like going round and round in circles in analysis paralysis, um, it might help to kind of break it down and go with your gut. I think that's another thing about Cancer season, is essentially the moon is the card of the priestess or the high priestess. And so this is trusting yourself. This is about knowing that and you don't need other people or outside influences to tell you. Like what actually Spencer was saying in the beginning of the program when we're talking about this gut and trusting the body and what you feel in your, like, literally the pit of your stomach. That is a reliable indicator over maybe some of these options that can have lists and rationale all day, but what does that intuitive Cancerian and Piscean side of yourself say? Because we're all going to be thinking about our future, right? We got that moon in Sag square, and this is future type of energy, Jupiterian energy. So,
And I think
yeah,
it's okay to not feel like you have to have the answers all the time. I think
yes,
that's what I've been experiencing with Saturn and Pisces, second decan in particular, is you don't have to try to prove anything to anyone before you're ready. There's apprentice energy in that particular 10-degree section of Pisces. And there's stories of people who created a lot of challenges in their life and had some disasters due to overestimating their abilities. So I think Saturn says be realistic about your skill set. You don't have anything to prove to anyone. It's okay to be a student, I think, is what Jupiter says as well, right? And this is tough sometimes in our industries. We feel like we have to be guides or whatever, but we're all in a process of becoming and asking. I think helping people to ask the right questions is a great way to utilize an exiled Jupiter. And this is coming from a Jupiter Virgo,
yeah. So
right?
the man knows what he speaks of.
Sure.
Um, and this really comes back to last month's program, Gemini season, with Annalisa Six, and how I was talking about the beginner's mind. Like
Mhm.
this is what Jupiter asks of us. And and with Jupiter just naturally being all knowing, right? I know I have all the wisdom. I can see the stretch and the expanse of the cosmos and everything, all the philosophies all at once. And it's like, no, it's no, we need to ask questions. We need to have that beginner's mind. We need to want to learn. We need to in engage our curiosity in life, and curiosity doesn't have the answers. If you had the answers, you wouldn't be curious. So that is dive into the mystery. Let's not have it figured out, because it makes life a whole lot more interesting
Absolutely.
when you don't know. So, all right, well, essentially the next day we have a full moon, so, or close to the next day on the 21st. So we are just going to rock it over to our first
Let's do it.
full moon in Capricorn at 1 degree in 7 minutes. It's like we get into Cancer season. It's like, surprise, full moon. You weren't ready for that, were you? Were you anticipating?
And
So,
the moon, Mercury, and Venus will all be out of bounds at this full moon.
oh, fun.
So, so that's
Oh, that's a
so
party.
so we might not be acting completely within our normal socially accepted ways of utilizing that planetary energy. We might be saying things that are outside the norm. We might be attracted to things that are outside the norm. We might be feeling and pushing our bodies to extremes. All characteristics of out of bounds planets.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because this is when they're out of bounds in the north declination versus the south. So there's this which I think can be more productive in the sense of going beyond what you're in a potentially good way. Maybe we take our sense of sort of that intuition or that feeling state or that ability to connect with what we actually really care about or to the people around us. Obviously there's going to be, so just quick precursor caveat that the second Capricorn full moon is kind of a doozy. And I was talking to Spencer about this actually yesterday, how back in 2021 we had a summer where we had 2 Aquarius full moons back to back in Aquarius season. And I noticed how the first full moon set the stage and the beginning for something that the second full moon had more of a wrap up sort of characteristic, right? Because here we have a full moon that's exposing the very beginning of a sign, especially a cardinal sign. I know, what can't you create here? Versus the 29-degree full moon that we're going to have later. That is obviously that anaretic degree that is really more about an old story that is wrapping up. So we have this kind of pivot or point around the polarity of what Spencer and I were talking about earlier about this more emotional care center, personal versus more of these systems and patriarchy and work and our outer persona versus our inner, emotional center. And then we're obviously coming off that square from Neptune, right? So that's still in the picture. So what comes to mind like immediately when you see this?
Yeah, the way I've started thinking about full moons is wherever the sun is at is sort of a collective set of intentions, potentially, a conscious intentions, like saying, okay, this is what we're trying to achieve. And wherever the moon is at is how we're infusing that into reality, how we're materializing it, how we're, collecting it into a body. So if you think about the sun, Mercury, and Venus, all in Cancer, first decan, it's related to harmonizing one-on-one relationships. It's a Venus-ruled decan. Venus will be powerful. Yeah, there you go.
Snake dancing, some snake unions
right
on the card.
So we might want to, we have this intention of trying to harmonize with individuals more than groups at this particular junction. But the moon being in its exile, it's a difficult terrain. Like there might be a sense of being denied the types of resources that we might desire to create that harmony. It's not necessarily a fertile place, that first 10-degree section of Capricorn. It's a place where we might have to tough it out, where we have to be a little bit more detached and we have to be a little bit more ruthless potentially than we might want to be during this Cancerian time, where I think it's probably we're faced with some tough decisions, especially like how we want to build our life to create that security. It could just be that the public conditions aren't very fertile at this point as well. We've got a lot of challenges in the collective right now with our, geopolitical situations. We have challenges within our food systems, within weather systems. So I think that the public is feeling the weight of that, which I think is a good word for a Capricorn moon.
Yeah, it definitely can be weighty with a full Capricorn moon. And it's true. For a lot of people, it feels like there's not a lot to go around right now. You think about this decan being the essentially the 2 of Pentacles, where we're juggling the change of material reality, and there is sort of this paring down in order to move forward, and maybe that is part of it. It's especially with that pile up over there in Cancer with Venus there and Mercury there, and Mercury's sextiling Mars too. So there is a focus on on what we care about in our relationships and how to like move them forward, or how we act in such places. I think about Mars also being in its detriment there too. So
Mm.
Mars isn't operating, which essentially Mars is tied to Capricorn too. So there's a lot of these earthly principles and our drive there, and our nourishment that is a little out of whack, I guess we could say. But we do have this sort of coming together of these other personal planets that really can, maybe through that difficulty, come together to uh almost like help and share with each other, even if there is hardship in other areas, if that makes sense. It's like, how can you rally in with love and care when the material world is not as hospitable?
Yeah, and Venus is actually really powerful in this position. It has dignity by face. I believe it's in its own triplicity, depending on if this is a day or a night chart. Um, and I think it's in its own bound too. Is that what I'm seeing here on your chart?
Yeah,
In its own terms?
she's in her,
So
she's on her terms right now.
yeah, so Venus is super juiced up. So I think being able to find support and nurturing within your own domestic situation, like your own, the people that really know you best, the people that unconditionally love you. I think that leaning on those folks for support during this period of time when the conditions in the collective are a little bit more harsh can be really supported. And Mercury in this position is on a fixed star called Elhina as well, which is called the proudly marching one. It's the heel of a goddess that is touching the earth. And so we might be seeing something that we feel, a cause that we feel very attached to. But when when the heel of a deity touches the earth in classical mythology, is said to sustain a wound. So maybe we're feeling like it's difficult to speak up for something that's important to us, or we're finding it's a wounding thing, but we need to do it anyway because it's the right thing to do, kind of thing.
Hmm. It made me think of like people here. I mean, obviously, if we have some economical shifts, which can definitely take place during these Capricorn full moons, it's like,
Mhm.
say there's maybe someone's starting a new job, or maybe someone's getting laid off a job, or maybe there's just difficulties in the workforce. And then there's this connection with everybody else where you like go and talk to your family and friends, and you're like, I'm having such a hard time over here, but these people are here to hear me out, and maybe even calm my persistent anger. You think about
Sure.
Taurus, of like, I just can't stop thinking about this and connecting with it, and then having that support system be there for all this material change. I mean, it's no, I can imagine a lot of shifts in the job markets, and then maybe
Sure.
in the financial sphere right now just happening. And
Well, and Mars is playing itself out very literally as well. There's challenges to the cattle industry in America at this point too, with avian flu starting to be a part of the cattle herds in America. And so that could really make food more expensive. It could create death within that industry. And food is already really expensive. The basics of life are already becoming very expensive. So I
yes.
think a lot of people around the world, not just America, are experiencing challenges with, hunger, famine, and a lack of comfortable situations. So, and that's really, honestly, that's one of the key components of a Cancerian time frame, is feeling comfortable, feeling safe. And Mars is putting some pressure on that right now.
Yeah. So here we have our first new moon, June 21st. It's going to be a Friday. All our key lunations take place pretty much on a Friday or like in the weekend. So it's like, you can
First
always
full
imagine some.
full moon, right? Full moon.
the first full moon, but also the quarters, the new moon, the second full moon, I think is going to be on a Sunday though, but it's almost like Friday moon time is going to be going on in Cancer season. So let us clear our slate here and move forward. And so what happens after this full moon? What does happen? So actually, there's not a whole lot that happens during this time period. Although we are going to see Mercury emerge, right? We talked about that. So actually, Mercury is going to be at the bending of the nodes on June 22nd. So that's something to be said. We haven't even really talked about that in relation to Cancer season because we do have the nodes in Aries and Libra. So we are at that quintessential turning point of eclipses, which is always very active. But Mercury at the bendings, then it's going to trine Saturn. And then Venus is going to reach the bending. So Venus is basically hot on Mercury's trail, not too much. Mercury's moving pretty fast, but so essentially go ahead.
These are such important turning points, the bending of the nodes.
Yes.
I wish people would talk about it a little bit more because it really is an inflection point where you're really having to make a choice. So I think that recognizing that this is a choice, maybe releasing some of our independence in service of coming together with other people at this point might be necessary with these planets at the bending of the nodes, as we're starting to move towards the South Node in Libra.
So personal story to go along with what you're saying there and to play into Mercury trining Saturn here. So I have Saturn ruling the bottom of my chart. I have an Aquarius IC. And during this time here, I'm going on what we are calling the pilgrimage. We're going back to the swamp. And so I'm going back home to see my mother and my father, who I have not seen my mom. I have not seen my mom since 2007. And I have not seen my dad since 1999. So,
oh my gosh.
That's a long time, right? You know, I stay true to my Aquarius IC. I am distant and far away, doing my own thing. But I'm making the pilgrimage, and I was thinking, that during this time, it's so interesting to see these bendings happening, especially during Cancer season, and how this, obviously it's going to be a turning point to see your family that you haven't seen in a very long time, especially to work through your own stuff, right? This is where we come from. And so I'm really looking forward. I'm looking forward to the trip. And I love the Mercury trine Saturn because Saturn rules my, fourth house of home and family. And so I feel like it's going to be really good. But it will be a turning point of connection for me in relation to family. So, in the distance, right? Saturn's very,
and it could help you to resolve old karma or old challenging narratives between you and another person, which is what we see with the South Node in Libra, right? Maybe it's even if it's not something that allows you to completely rekindle all of those relationships, at least what it'll help you do is have closure, right? So it's a turning point, I think, towards closure in our relationships on some level.
Absolutely. Well, and that's one of the reasons why I'm going. Granted, I'm like, I'm no spring chicken, so that means my parents are, spring chicken. So father time is like, well, knocking on your door, you only have so much time. But there is like, once again, back to that Cancerian part of myself, that deep instinctual part of myself that realizes like, this is something I need to do in order for my own life to move to the next stage. And so, I'm super excited about this. It's going to be my mom's 70th birthday the next day on June 26th, which I think is what happens, or not June 26th.
Mel, are you realizing too that these planets are on the bending of the nodes, like almost exactly conjoining your sun?
Oh my God. Wait, hold on. Oh my gosh, right? Spencer. Spencer, right? I'm having a total brain fart right now, right? I am actually not going here then. I'm going on July. I'm going No, I'm going after at the next full moon. All right,
Well,
everybody scratch my story. You can still keep my story, but
I'll
not in
tell you what,
relation to the bendings.
Mel, here's something interesting.
That's so
Are
funny.
you familiar with Jeffrey Cornelius's The Moment of Astrology, that book?
No.
So it's an incredible book that talks about almost the astrology as an oracular science, or as something where he's almost attempting to prove that you can disconnect a chart from a specific time and place. And to me, this is a great example of this, is because we were talking about a specific issue in your life, and this chart was reflecting a number of those issues, even though it was completely disconnected from the time that you were talking about. It was an omen that was speaking to you in your life. And I think that's really powerful, that sometimes we see charts that can be completely disconnected from time and space, and they will be speaking like a tarot card, right, does to something in our life. It's a symbol that's speaking to us.
That's so funny. Yeah. No, I mean, it came up. I was like, oh, this is going to, yeah, I saw it. And then, oh my goodness, that's so funny. Well, we are under, we're recording this under first quarter in Virgo
There
with,
you go.
yeah, with the Cazimi and the Mercury squaring
Sure.
Saturn. So my details were a little off,
Yeah,
but
you
yes,
know,
it fits with the Cancerian story and,
right.
how that's all changing. So, I guess what we are saying here is that this is a big turning point. It's a turning point with our perceptions in the Cancerian place of our charts, and all these Cancerian qualities, and this kind of emotional filtering through the mind that we're talking about, our ability to connect and speak our mind to our loved ones, and speak on things that we care about, and then obviously the Venus quality, the Venus at the bending of the nodes. Obviously this is going to be a turning point in relation, artistic projects, creative leanings, maybe
Hmm.
justice movements, things like that. um so it does seem tame if you just look at it from afar, but I feel like it's very supportive, especially with Mercury trining Saturn, because we're under the lunation that Mercury was essentially moving to square Saturn under. So
Right.
what was difficult maybe in the Gemini period, or maybe even when we were talking about having all these options, but then Saturn's like, but you have limits, or you don't know yet, you don't know what to choose or pick. Now there's more of this sense of communion with those two planets from an emotional, intuitive standpoint that makes choices maybe easier, even if they're difficult, and allows sort of a turning of the page to happen.
And acceptance, right? I mean, that's the
Yes.
thing. Like, once you go from the square to the trine, it's like you've been shown what the limitations are. And now, if you work within them and accept them instead of try to swim against the current of your life, then Saturn can give you gifts, right? I think that Saturn is all about consequences, and consequences don't always have to be bad. It's just a result of our actions over time.
That's right. That's right. Just the good old nature of cause and effect.
There you go.
Um, all right. So basically, we're gonna move on. So this is basically midweek of the last week of June, and we're headed towards. We got the moon over there in Aquarius. Obviously, we're gonna get the moon in Pisces on Wednesday and Thursday both. So we're gonna get that Saturn Neptune sandwich on Thursday here. Um, and we're going to be leading into the last quarter in Aries, which is the turning point of our lunation cycle here on Friday, June 28th. And I always think about that lead up from Pisces to Aries. We go through this whole Saturn, Neptune uh jumble, and then all of a sudden we're like rebirth into into the fire that is Aries. And then we get this
Right.
turning point. Um that also coincides with Mercury squaring Chiron and Venus sextiling Mars, which is definitely significant in their cycle. So let's think about this last quarter and leading up. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's fascinating that the moon will be pretty close to the north node during that last quarter,
Yeah.
because usually last quarter moons suggest an existential crisis of trying to let go of something. So I'm finding the paradox of having the moon being increased by the North Node, but also be a requirement of letting go of something particularly fascinating. And I think that this moon in Aries, first decan of Aries, I think it's kind of a point in time to release radical independence or the illusion of our independence. I
Mm.
think oftentimes, especially in the West, we feel like we are these lone wolves that are doing everything without help or whatnot. And the truth of the matter is that we are all in relationship to one another, and that we are all in an ecosystem, a society, etc. And this, I think, could be a moment to understand, to be able to harmonize our relationships. We might have to let go of some of our individual desires that are so strong that they're creating tension, that they're creating separation. So I think this is an opportunity, honestly, to let go of feeling like we have to do everything independently, and how can we join with others in a way that's meaningful.
I love that. And it really speaks to the Venus Mars sextile, right? Which is, Venus and
Mhm.
Mars are the rulers of the current nodal situation right now. So there is the nodal story is essentially having the opportunity to work with that polarity in a amicable way that feels good around your ability to connect and be in union and to receive, but also be yourself, and have a sense of just where you're going and what you're passionate about. I like this too in the sense of thinking about what we were talking about before about Cancer's ability to hold on, where Aries, especially after we go through the whole lead up is Saturn to Neptune, and then we get this last quarter. And Aries loves that. Is like, give me a new beginning, give me a challenge, give me something that I can wrap my, I don't want to hang on. I'm ready to,
Mhm.
let's go to this next thing. And so it feels like because essentially the sun has to look to the moon. So
Yeah,
I'm wondering too if there is this desire nature that comes up, whether it's in relationship or maybe it's within our creative projects and what we want to put into form in life. And Mercury's working through the Chiron issue of assertion, or sometimes anger. Anger is very informative. When we're angry about something, a lot of times it's informing us what needs to change. And since Aries loves to change, I feel like this is an opportunity to have that turning point where we're aligned with the North Node and we're like, you know what? I can't hold on here any longer. It doesn't serve me to be attached to this anymore. And
sure.
I really want to go in this new direction. So how do I feel at ease with myself and my creative force, even though there is mentally maybe some wounding about releasing that, so that you can really turn the page and move on.
Absolutely.
Moving on.
Moving on.
So moving on. So, but Aries, just in general, Aries quarter, especially the last quarter, might be a little hot and heavy in the skies, in the sense where people are going to be fired up. But that's not always a bad thing. There could just be a lot of, it could just be a lot of life happening,
Yeah,
a lot of
just tension,
liveliness.
tension between your own individual desires and the needs of your group, family, relationships, etc.
Yeah, but I do love that Mars Venus sextile
Yeah, that's
because
nice.
their cycle is long and this aspect does not happen every day. So enjoy this connective period.
And Venus has a unique ability to pacify Mars, like especially in myth. Like that was one of the ways to deal with Ares, is to send Aphrodite in there to, copulate, like that, make him relaxed.
Oh,
So
that was, yeah, that
maybe
was
maybe this
happening.
is maybe this is some of the activities that could lead to a better outcome potentially. And now we've transitioned into the Cancer after dark
Yeah,
period,
this is
the quiet storm.
this is the after hours of
Right.
Venus and Mars getting
There you
together.
go.
And so
There you go.
but they are getting together as dun 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 the next day, June 29th on Saturday, we have good old Saturn station in retrograde. So if you have any planets at about 19 degrees of mutable signs, you will be feeling this station because your Saturnian journey will be having its turning point. So we have Saturn stationing retrograde within all of this. So think about that just as the lead up, especially when the moon went over Saturn just a few days earlier on Thursday. There is this Saturnian story that is brewing. And keep in mind, Saturn was squaring the whole lunation that this whole lunar cycle has been under since June 6th. So caveat there. So there is a Saturnian turning point happening here, but I really like also that Mercury is sextiling Uranus this weekend. So, it makes that square to Chiron, but then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I can see some things differently now. I can think outside of the box here. And yeah, and that's not all who's stationing. We are going to have Neptune stationing here in a hot second, but let's just think about this vibe quickly with Saturn stationing, and maybe Mercury, Uranus on top of that. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's an important opportunity to review how you maybe overestimate your abilities, and it's an opportunity to say, hey, you know what, maybe I need to learn some more before I engage with this particular project, etc. It's a good opportunity to review the structures that you've built. You may have to surrender even more with Saturn retrograding in that space, and then combine that with Mercury and Uranus. That decan of that 10-degree section of Cancer is often related to surplus versus scarcity, and that 10-degree section of Taurus that Uranus is in is related to remedying past mistakes or humility in the face of nature. So I think that when you see a Mercury-Uranus sextile here with those two particular decans, we might be remedying a situation of scarcity, or we may be having interesting ideas of what to do with our surpluses, especially if it is in regards to repairing something that has fallen into disrepair, either through our rashness or through our or just through something out of our control. And that fits really well with Saturn retrograding at that point, because it's a review process and going back and redoing something.
Yeah. And I think that Saturn does love to the retrograde process, we do have to review that Saturn. And so it's not going to send us into retrograde without our homework, right?
Exactly.
It's going to assign us the lesson or the task or what needs to be repurposed or spent more time with or internalized in some way. And that's not always a bad thing. I mean, it's probably going to be a little more tense for the people that have these, harsher aspects going on, that are going to be involved in bigger life shaping, right? If you're getting a Saturn square or opposition or conjunction, this is a important moment in your life story where Saturn is molding you into form, so to speak. But for the rest of us, there might just be these, I don't want to call them minuscule, but like it's not going to be as intense, but we'll feel it. We'll feel it. And it's Cancer season, right? So if we don't feel it, someone around us is bound to feel it, and we're all going to be feeling it. So this kind of brings us to sort of the next big day. There's a lot happening, actually. We're going to go into July here. So let's just move on over. We got the Taurus moon on Sunday. Keep in mind, we do have Mars moving through Taurus. It's not quite in the range of Uranus yet, but we are getting the moon conjunction to Mars and then conjunction to Uranus. That early July 1st, actually, on that Monday. So maybe a little precursor foresight to Mars Uranus a little later this month. Let us move on, though, to July 2nd, when we actually have the moon conjuncting Jupiter in Gemini. But that, of course, is not all that's going on. We have, let me get my little pin here. We have Neptune now stationing 29 degrees and 55 minutes. The game of how close can you get to Aries before turning around? And then we have Mercury, which is going to trine Neptune and then immediately move into Leo. So we have that change taking place. We also have Venus, old Venus here. She is trining our recently retrograde Saturn. And last but not least, we have the Sun squaring the nodes.
And
Dun,
Mercury
dun,
opposing.
dun.
Mercury opposing Pluto too, right?
But pretty much, yeah. We
Yeah,
might as well
pretty
just throw
close.
that in there. Yeah, because it is the next day. We can just
Yeah.
allow that in, and let's just caveat. This is all the lead up. We have Mercury opposing Pluto the day before July 4th here in the United States.
Oy, oy, oy.
Yeah, so there's a lot of tension going on in that skies, but there's a lot going on once we get into July. July 2nd, 3rd, we got a new moon on the 5th. So let's think about this balsamic moment. What pops out to you first?
Well, like we were talking about with the bending of the nodes, having the sun at the bending of the nodes, I think will be important specifically for the Leo area of our chart. One of the things I like to do when I'm seeing planets at the bending of the nodes is, yes, you want to understand where the topic that the planet is in this case, Cancer or your Cancer house, but also hearkening it back to the planet or the topic, that the planet rules or provides resources for. So when Mercury was at the bending of the nodes, looking at the Gemini and Virgo area of your chart, and then when Venus was at the bending of the nodes, the Taurus and Libra area of your chart in particular. So I do think that it's interesting to see the sun at the bending of the nodes while Mercury ingresses into Leo. So I think that a turning point here is important, but it's also very connected to that Mercury-Pluto opposition, where we might be asking questions about our visibility and how it fits in with the challenges of society. A lot of people have been talking a lot about artificial intelligence and what does it mean to be an individual now with AI taking on creative roles that people used to enjoy doing. So there could be things around that happening. What else we got here? Venus trining Saturn?
Saturn, Venus trining Saturn.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is understanding what the limitations are in your relationships and being in alignment with them. It could also be making a commitment to something that some person that you love or something that you want to bring into your life. Oftentimes, Venus, Saturn, harmonious relationships like this can just be solidifying and making a relationship more enduring. So maybe some of the challenges that we're experiencing socially could lead to us recommitting to our personal relationships in a way that where we're feeling like we need those folks in our life, right? Where we say, oh, you know what, this public issue is really challenging, but I'm really appreciating the people that are in my closest circle.
Yeah, it's an interesting story that's happening here in relation to what you were talking about with Mercury basically moving into Leo to it has its spaced out moment with Neptune stationing, and anybody that has planets at the anaretic degrees of mutable signs, you're going to feel that Neptune energy. But Mercury is almost like tapped into more of this spiritual, imaginative, otherworldly sort of space, which a lot of times can reconfigure us and our vision. And so here we have the sun in this placement of our sense of self and the identity, and also in an intuitive place of Cancer, hitting this bending of the node. So, and then Mercury immediately is confronted with the depth of change that comes with the mindset once it looks at that Pluto and what has happened. So it's almost like to me, this feels like the individual story is ripe with some intense changes that are happening. And Mercury is really serving as the scout right now. If we think about ants, like it is going through the Pluto, it's going through the motions that the sun will around the time of the full moon that we're going to be getting to. While
Yeah.
the Venus Saturn piece, especially since I mean, I do like the fact that the moon is conjuncting Jupiter while all this is happening for the most part, but the Venus Saturn piece feels very supportive in the sense that, to me, that maybe there are these relationships that we can count on, whether they're romantic, they're best friends, they're business partnerships, what have you, that can be almost the rock while we go through this personal change, right?
Sure.
It's a lot to change on an individual level and then not feel supported by anybody around you. But what if you go through these individual changes and we're all going through it, and then we support each other on the other end of that with having benevolence of maybe the Gemini moon talking it out, right? We're in this balsamic phase where, or maybe we're talking it out within ourselves, and we're feeling in harmony with sort of what is solidifying or these harder choices that are happening. And so there's a lot brewing here, but I think the ease of receiving it all is nice with that Venus, basically the Venus Jupiter action, personally.
Yeah. I like moon Jupiter conjunctions. They're always somewhat pleasant.
So that's somewhat pleasant as long as you don't grab
Y-
a bag
And
of supersized chips. No.
right. I mean, the only thing to think about with this one that could be a challenge is with the moon activating Jupiter like that music box tine, striking the key of Jupiter in Gemini. It could just be that we feel like we're paralyzed by too many different directions that we could go in, right? I mean,
That's
it could
true.
really expand our options. And with, Neptune stationing retrograde, we may be reevaluating what brings meaning into our lives that we're willing to sacrifice for. That, again, both, to me, this decan of Pisces has the most correspondence, I think, with Neptune archetypes in general. Like I'm not saying that Neptune rules this area or anything like that, but I do think that there are some similar themes in that decan of what are you willing to sacrifice for? How can you transcend your mundane physical reality? And we see that 10 of Cups kind of card with the happily ever after rainbow type of experience. And but what is not seen in that card is what are you willing to do to create that? Um, I, I don't think anybody should ever forget that Mars rules that 10-degree section of Pisces. So there is a lot of like martyrdom that happens within that decan potentially, or being completely committed to a spiritual or religious belief system in doing whatever it takes to serve that. So there might be some questions that we have around that way of thinking with Neptune stationing retrograde. And, I mean, Mercury opposing Pluto really could just have us questioning some of the corruption that is happening or that is revealed to us through that opposition. Pluto to me always reveals things that have fallen into disrepair or underground or corruption, or it is an opportunity to transform those things into something different.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, as you were speaking, I'm just thinking about the also the corruption, especially since there's so much Jupiter activity going on and Neptune is stationing. We think about these Pisces energy, Saturn just stationed, uh, and sort of the corruption perhaps of our belief systems, and how, it's really the underlying bedrock that we make all our decisions from. And so this would be a ripe time to see the illusions that we uh, create for ourselves based on sticking to certain ideologies or ways of thinking, that are not really serving sort of the turning point of the individual and what we want in our purpose in life, which does lead to the sacrifice and all that. But we're not going to sacrifice and make changes if we have belief systems that are upholding,
That's true.
you know, parts of us that just won't allow for that to happen. So I look at it and it's almost like a great crumbling must happen during this time.
That's Neptune, right? Neptune
Yeah.
is a solvent. It dissolves things, you know,
It is.
and sometimes Neptune transits to me always make me feel super tired because I'm just like, ugh, it's just like feel like I've dissolved into a puddle onto the floor when there's Neptune aspects happening in my
It's
personal
overwhelming.
experience. Yeah, a little bit.
I mean,
yeah.
there could be a lot of overwhelm right now here too. So just to be aware, or you could just feel like you don't even want to get out of bed.
Mhm.
Right now your brain's on overload, but there is nothing more, you know, Mars and Taurus is not the most active of Mars, I don't believe, especially Venus and Saturn slowing things down. So we'll see. But needless to say, within all of this, it makes for a very intriguing lead in to the new moon and also a very intriguing 4th of July here in America, knowing that we have a lot of tension going on. So let's just skip towards our new moon here in the interest of saving time. And so here we have our new moon on July 5th, which is a Friday. Once again, it's going to be in the evening time, 6:57 Eastern. It'll be mid-afternoon Pacific if you're here in the US. 14 degrees and 23 minutes of Cancer. So what do we got going on here? We do
I
have,
like this. I kind of like this new moon.
yeah, you feeling it?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I'm got my eyes on is Mars getting pretty close to Uranus there. So that is the elephant in the room with this chart. But I think that the moon is in its own domicile. It's in its own sign. There's a positive aspect with Saturn. It's on the fixed star Sirius at 14 degrees of Cancer, 14 to 15 degrees of Cancer, which is a very, very intense fixed star associated with the return of fertility to the Nile in the Egyptian Nile River Valley. So like that area would flood and it would bring like nutrients to the farmland. So I think there's some potential for this being a new phase of fertility, potentially a new start with that, especially with Venus hanging out with the lunation as well. There could be I think the only warning with Venus in that decan of Cancer is craving luxuries that are beyond our means. So I guess that would be one little caveat, asterisk type of thing.
Basically my entire life. That's my story.
Yeah, I have Mercury in that decan too, so I've been guilty of that in the past as well. But yeah, and then just Mars and Uranus coming together, and we can talk about that. But I've got my eye on that for sure.
Yeah, I think we all have our eyes on Mars Uranus there. It's always not a bi-yearly. What is it when it's every 2
Biannual.
years? Biannual? Is that twice a year though? What's every 2 years?
Yeah, I don't know.
Is that the right? Well, whatever. Every 2 years we essentially we give or take, we get a Mars Uranus. But it is interesting to see this new moon. Obviously, like you said, the moon's in domicile, so it gives that extra lunar juice there. But it is creating, I mean, it's not the tightest of trines or sextiles, but it is flowing with that Mars and Saturn. And Mars is sextiling Saturn pretty tightly here. So, which I like. I mean, I like I don't mind Mars and Saturn together. Honestly, I live with it. I have a square. There's times I don't like it. But
Sure.
when we're talking about the sextile, this is very productive to me. Like this helps things get down to business.
Well,
If you
and
haven't,
think about the contrast that we had between that full moon in Capricorn, where the resources that the sun was drawing upon were of lower quality or not exactly what it wants. Okay. And that I should back up, because like the moon in Capricorn can do many amazing things, so that I don't offend my moon
Yes.
in Capricorn audience.
Excuse me.
I know.
We
So,
are powerhouses. Thank you.
right. So I'll have to be careful. But at this, the intentions of the sun are in alignment with the resources that the moon is providing at this point. So there is less of a having to go against the grain, right, on this particular lunation.
Yeah. Which is nice. I mean, that's where who doesn't like a resourced moon?
Yeah.
We want a juicy Cancer area of our chart, right? We want to feel those Venusian vibes. It's very fertile in many respects. I think just seeing Venus there, the moon in domicile, we got Mercury getting pretty close to a sextile with Jupiter. We got Mars and Saturn working together. It's better than working against each other. And it's interesting because it is in proximity of Uranus. So it's almost like it feels very nurturing to form in the
Right.
cardinal sense, right? It's like, what do you love? What do you care about? What's your intuition speaking to? What relationships are you seeking to build? How are you, even with yourself? Like there's this fortifying quality that even if we're not going to see it in the outer world, there is this shift and this solidification and this security happening in the inner realm, while the minds and Jupiter are looking at all these options and playing with what that looks like, while we're almost toughening up on the inside, so that we can be sound within ourselves to make the change, like the outer world changes when the time comes, I guess,
Well,
is kind of
and
what I'm seeing
this
here.
is our shared solar decan, the second 10-degree section of Cancer, and it has been called by the decan guru, Mr. Kopic, the walled garden, right? A safe space to create nurturing, and it's a very specific set of circumstances that you're trying to create. Like he talks about hothouse flowers, where we are needing to create this this place that we can be our very idiosyncratic selves, and we may not survive in every single environment. So this is a new moon to start planting seeds as far as what is the environment that you need, and how can you protect whatever you're trying to nurture against the whatever would threaten its full flowering, if that makes sense, or its full fruiting on some level. So something to keep in mind with that as well.
Yes, because we want fruits. We want fruits from our efforts. We got to care and nurture
Right.
our fruits. And as you're talking about it, I'm thinking about the nature. We talked about cardinal signs earlier, and these being pivot points and action points. But what's important to remember about cardinal solstice signs such as Cancer and Capricorn, since we have 3 lunations back to back in these signs, is these are the most extreme of pivots. So if they're like, we're not talking about like, oh, I'm kind of changing a little bit over here, I'm feeling this over there. We're talking about like, no, these are big, these are big like swing shifts, where maybe you felt one way 2 weeks prior, and then you get to this new moon and it's just like something completely like shifts, and you go in a totally different direction, which can be surprising to yourself, can be surprising to other people. I mean, that could be part of the lead up of Mars Uranus energy, where you think you're going one way with the Cancer, and then all of a sudden bam, it's Uranus, and then we got a different story going. But I like that. It's like leave room for change to take place that can be extreme, because sometimes the extreme and going to the totally different polarity or a totally different side is just what you need. Like you gotta get out of
Your
that
ruts, right?
rut.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, that's what Mars is really, that's the best way to use this Mars in in Taurus, is to reshape your routines and get out of a comfort zone that might not be good for you, right? Taurus is consistent, but that consistency isn't always leading to growth. And Mars is going to show us the things that we are doing that is in the name of consistency and inner peace, but aren't actually moving us forward in our life.
Yeah. And I mean, that's where Saturn come in too, because, Mars is talking to Saturn over there, and Saturn's like, yeah, I'm all about solidifying form, but I'm also an immutable sign and one that is spiritually based. So you know what? Your form's looking a little off. Your form is a little, a little too solid for what I'd like. So can you just switch this up over here, over there, and over there? And I'm going to
Sure.
back you into the wall so that you're not as stubborn with how you're doing things. And then bam, Uranus. So, and speaking of Uranus, so part of this new moon energy, we do see Venus. Um, she is coming off that trine to Saturn, but at the same time, she also is doing some things here. So she is having her square to Chiron during this new moon, and then basically the day after, or not the day after, but pretty close here. What is it? On the 8th, a few days later, we have Venus sextiling Uranus. Sad little shift there, but so we have Venus sextiling Uranus. Oh, my drawings are a little off here, people, but we have Venus sextiling Uranus, and then we also have that Mercury Jupiter sextile happening. So I don't know. I kind of think this is a little bit off to a good. This is around our birthdays, right? I think your
That's my birthday.
birthday.
Yeah.
Here
July
we got
7th.
Spencer's birthday,
Yeah,
July
this is
7th.
basically my solar return chart, but with the moon opposing Pluto at the actual solar return. So it's super fun.
Yeah, we were commiserating. He's got the
Yeah.
moon opposing Pluto, and I got the moon squaring Mars.
And I'll
so.
be in a Mars perfection year with Mars, applying to Uranus and in its exile. So
Well, luckily
speaking
I'm
of,
not in a Mars
that,
year, so.
that particular decan, it's all about humility in the face of nature. So keep an eye out for weather changes. I'm looking out the window here because we are seeing weather changes in real time as we're recording this with some potential storms in our area. So
Oh, I wish I had a storm right now. Oh my
No, you
God,
don't.
great. I'm like, I look outside, it's like bright and sunny, perfect blue skies. It's a little warm today, about 78.
Well,
California.
yeah, I mean, in the past, thunderstorms used to be like these cool events. Now they become like these super wind and hail events. As a gardener, it's just like it's very destructive. We had really destructive hailstorms last year, along with the wildfires and that's the kind of thing. So I get a little bit on edge sometimes when the storms
You're
are
protecting
coming.
your babies.
Totally, right?
You're
Here's the
protecting your
Cancerian
little
thing.
babies.
In real time.
Yeah.
And we've had some tornadoes that have popped up very unexpectedly in our area over the last few weeks without warning. So it's another thing that has been happening in our area in Michigan.
All that Gemini. It's all
Yep.
Gemini, that Jupiter, Pluto. Yeah.
Yep.
So, well, around your birthday, aside from the Pluto action, we have Venus sextiling Uranus and Mercury sextiling Jupiter. I feel like this is a nice little start to, I mean, granted, we do have the moon in Leo that'll have some tense aspects with both Pluto and Mars, as we're talking about. But there's these other, relational and sort of that sense of balance within oneself that is kind of maybe more opening to the changes or what Uranus wants to upgrade in our lives, right? It's almost like Venus is almost like striking a deal with Uranus, right? Uranus is in Venus's sign. Mars is about to get there. But she's like, how about you look at it like this way? Or what about how you feel this way? Wouldn't that feel good to switch that up and change that? And Mercury and Jupiter are like, but think of the future and what could be and all the possibilities. So yeah, it feels, what do you think?
Yeah, it's just shaking us up, right? It's helping us to I really strongly feel that final decan of Taurus is really about repairing things that have fallen into challenging conditions. And here's the thing, it's not always our own fault. Sometimes it's just, the way of change. So for example, at the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, I got some information about my diet that helped me eliminate some foods that had been causing gastric upset for over a decade. And that was a really an aha moment. It just came very randomly. And I've been feeling really good physically after that. So I would say that as Mars starts to conjoin with Uranus, think about what was revealed to you at the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction and then at the Mercury-Uranus conjunction. And was there something that was shown to you that you needed to fix? Because if you haven't fixed it by the time that Mars and Uranus come together, that's when some of the tension points start to come, the unexpected challenges around it. So just to be forewarned is to be forearmed or whatnot. So I think that thinking back to those other times can help prepare you for the types of things that you might experience.
Literally outside my window right now, just a gust of wind just starts coming through. It's like, and I'm like, what?
Right?
Spencer, did you do this?
Yeah.
Did you bring the wind to
Yeah, it's just
Southern
gotten
California?
it's gotten very dark here, like very quickly. So
that's funny. All right. Well, so we're off to a good start here. Let's continue moving along on our new Cancerian journey. Because the season really always begins once the new moon does. So let us carry on. What's next? What's next? So many notes. So, we're on to, so we're gonna fly past my birthday over here, July 9th. If anybody wants to send cards or gifts or Venmo, please, you know where to find me. Same with Spencer.
Yeah.
We have, lucky me, we have the sun trining Saturn. But we also have Venus doing her heliacal evening rise. So she is going to be visible in the night sky starting actually around July 10th. So let's go over to July 10th here. And so we're going to be able to see Venus again. Ta-da! She's going to be big and bright in the evening sky. So definitely look for her on the horizon, especially as, we get further into July and into August. But we have our quintessential sun trining Saturn, which happens after Saturn goes retrograde, right? So I like to think about this as a nice integrative Saturnian moment, right? Saturn is retrograde, it is internalized, the sun gets a moment with it. It's water signs, it's very introspective in that sense. Right. So what do you think about, just lining it up here for a couple things to save time. We also have Venus at the tail end of Cancer, and she is trining Neptune at this time too. And then she'll ingress into Leo and oppose Pluto. We'll get to that in a moment. But right now we got Sun, Saturn, Venus, Neptune.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a moment where we're aware of who we are and what we need to do to keep growing, or what our limitations are, what work is ahead of us. I think that's another thing to think about, is what kind of things are we committed to. To me, the sun is an illuminator, right? So we will get an illumination of what types of things we need to commit to at this point. And I think that it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's with Venus moving into that opposition with Pluto, though, there could also be some challenges in the collective needs versus our own personal desires. So with Saturn in the overcoming trine to both of those planets, Saturn's in charge. Saturn is really showing us that if we don't acknowledge some of these limitations, that's when Saturn gives out its quote unquote punishments or consequences, etc. But if we accept those things, then I think we can navigate it with much more grace. And you can see Mars is starting to apply to Uranus too. So there just is probably some things that we have to accept, that we have to fix. And we might not be able to do everything that we want to do personally because the needs of the collective are greater at this point.
Mm. Mm.
And that's, the moon's opposite, Saturn on that couple
That's
days as
true
well.
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
We are faced with Saturn there, but
Yeah.
I like to think about its integrative factor of how we, because sometimes we're in denial of Saturn, or we don't want to deal with Saturn, or we're not fully aware of what Saturn is trying to communicate to us, or don't want to look at it. But the sun really illuminates it. And it feels like it's more manageable, even if it is slowing or delaying or cooling or what have you. It's yeah, it's just we can just integrate it more. And maybe Venus is, I feel like everything just slows down here too. Maybe before we get the fiery Venus and Leo and the opposition to Pluto, because Venus trine Neptune, I don't know. I don't want to do much when Venus is trining Neptune. Saturn and Sun, maybe that sounds like a little bit of delay, like the moon opposing it too. Like there just might not be much oomph from a very basic standpoint. Like it's midweek, July 10th. We might just be more in this spacey introspective space. So be kind to yourself, be compassionate to yourself.
Absolutely.
Because we're gonna have our moment here with Venus. I mean, Venus and Leo versus Venus and Cancer. Two different two different ladies we're talking about here. And then add some Pluto to that. Like, I'm sorry. I feel like we have a drama queen coming out immediately as she hits the Venus or Leo there. And then of course we have, so okay, let's line this all up because this is a whole package, right? We got Venus moving into Leo. She opposes Pluto. And then we have basically a first quarter moon in Libra. So Venus is informing this first quarter moon in Libra, where the moon's actually going to be on the south node when the Venus Pluto thing happens. And then we have also the sun squaring Chiron and Mars conjuncting Uranus, all within this July 11th through July 15th space. So basically this week of there's a lot going on here that leading us to first quarter. So anything you want to say about any piece of that? Or
So
the whole?
The third 10-degree section of Libra has a spirit or a daimon associated with it called Nemesis. And Nemesis was a goddess that restored right proportion. It was related a little bit to Saturn. So Nemesis increases that which is lacking and decreases that which is excessive. So I think that there could be, and with it being squared to the sun in Cancer 3, that decan is all about excess versus scarcity. So I think that this is an important moment to examine your life and see if there is something excessive that you need to rebalance, that you need to decrease, or if there's something that you're lacking that needs to be increased so that you can have proper equilibrium within your life. And of course, you got Mars and Uranus coming together. I unfortunately, I have a feeling that that could coincide with some extreme weather events, potentially something of that nature. I would encourage everyone to make sure you're slowing down around that period of time to be able to avoid accidents. That's one of the aspects that astrologers, well, that I get kind of antsy about. And with Mars and Uranus together on Algol, that is a fixed star that it has a challenging reputation for violence or for losing our cool, losing our head, etc. You can also think about it as a very protective fixed star if you think about it from there's a feminist version of that myth where Athena helped Medusa. Algol is the blinking eye of Medusa. So you think about the head becoming separated from the body. But there is a feminist take on it where Athena is actually providing Medusa with the ability to defend herself after experiencing a sexual abuse in a temple. So there might be something where we're feeling like we need to defend ourselves, or where we're feeling like we're trying to remedy a past mistake of some sort with that humility in the face of nature. But what I will say about Mars, Uranus, and Taurus 3, it is important to not test the limits of the natural world. So like, for example, if you have a storm coming into your area, like you should go in the basement or something of that nature. If like you've been warned about these types of things, I really feel strongly about that as a preparatory thing, or having just all of your emergency plans in place. And I'm not trying to like be a fear monger about that, but this is definitely one of the ones where unexpected misfortunes can arise. Sometimes due to moving too fast, sometimes due to things that are completely out of our control.
Yeah, there is definitely going to be the unforeseen component that happens when Uranus is around, especially a first quarter moon. I'd be remiss to say if I didn't think this was highly triggering in relational matters.
Sure.
Thinking about a first quarter moon in Libra, Venus, Pluto, Mars, Uranus. It's all coming down kind of more to the Venus side of things, with Mars and Uranus being in Venus's sign. And there's so when we think about, we want to slow down and watch for accidents or missteps, and that is definitely applied relationally too, because there's a
Right.
lot of tense energy going on, and there's the ability to wound or be aware of our wounds um during the issues that we have with others, right? Because we see essentially the first quarter in Libra is in a T square with Chiron and Aries. So we have this very tense signature that can change the trajectory of relationships and the depth of them in an instant. So what do you want to do? Do you want to take it down and get into the muck of it all and bring up the wounds and just disrupt everything? Or are you looking to find liberation and dealing with what was hidden or under the surface, or calling things that are difficult to into awareness so that you can harmonize them? Or maybe it's a little bit of both. Sometimes we need to break down to break through, sort of thing. So
And
I'm
if
thinking
you,
this is highly volatile in the relational
yeah, well,
department,
and
July
think about this
13th -ish.
too. Like this could also be very much related to, if we were to like role play this out, it could be an argument about money, resources, etc. Like maybe someone feels like there's excessive spending in one area of the budget in a relationship or a family, or someone else is like, hey, I'm not getting what I need in this particular type of experience. So when you have Mars and Uranus together on Algol, very important to give yourself extra space to converse about these things in a way that will respect everyone's peace, everyone's autonomy, etc. Because when Mars and Uranus come together, your anger can, like you said, can shift in an instant to the point where you might say something, do something that you regret. And especially with Venus opposite Pluto, it could bring up really challenging conversations in the relationships like you were speaking towards. So around this period of time, I've always advised practice extra self-care. Give people extra space, extra grace. Try to alleviate and release the steam valve before it bubbles over into a volcanic eruption, right? So try not to ignore things so that they don't get to the point where you're getting into a series of ultimatums or all or nothing type of severances.
Yeah. And I think as you're speaking, I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, there's a lot of potential for double down, right?
Yep.
We got Taurus, we've got Leo, we've got Aquarius, we've got fixed energy basically,
Yeah.
that is not necessarily that movable, but luckily that Sun, Moon, and Chiron are in movable signs that can move the situation and push it somewhere different. So let's lean into the cardinal qualities of actually the grace and the compromise and that we're talking about, more so than just doubling down on particular positions for the sake of, wanting to for the justice of it. Libra moon loves some justice. So do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? So
And
kind of thing.
Jupiter is on a fixed star called Aldebaran, which is really, it's a royal fixed star of Persia that asks you to have integrity at all times, right?
Yes.
It says it will grant you gifts and power, etc. But its nemesis is if you are out of alignment or out of integrity, that's when the consequences come from that particular fixed star. So I think it's really important to be above board. And if you do get into an argument, to maintain your integrity, maintain your equilibrium, and try to find, like you said, win-win situations.
Yeah. Because the moon's kind of close to Spica, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Which is known as a pretty good star in the sky, especially relationally speaking. So.
And I feel also collectively, this is getting very, very close to the sentencing in a specific leader's court case in America. So that is also part of this story, nationally, globally, etc. Is, I believe that's the 14th and the 15th. That's going to be happening.
Okay. And so, and the 15th is the perfection of the Mars-Uranus conjunction. So, which I believe is near that person's particular midheaven.
Yep.
Over in that zone. Yeah. So we can imagine, and I believe that sun is also on that person's Venus-Saturn zone.
Yep.
So we know who is going to be in the spotlight then.
That's right.
And then once again, to what Spencer was talking about, the collective response, because obviously the call to power, the relation of power and the Plutonian energies, and we're leading to a full moon that's connected to that. So
Right.
sun's on its way there. Pluto is very present. So let us move on. So we do have then a few days later on the 18th, we have the moon moving through Scorpio, which will also rile some folks up, I'm sure, during that time. Yeah, lovely. Moon in Scorpio, while basically opposite. Let's just heads up. July 16th, Tuesday, that's when we have that moon in Scorpio opposing Mars-Uranus conjunction.
And
so
that feels almost feels like a no-win situation. Like it doesn't matter what happens, people are going to be upset about it, and that the person in question has a history of riling up his base when he doesn't get what he wants.
Yeah. So whether you're riled up by that person or other people, or you're riled up in yourself, there's a riling up, I guess we could say, between around July 15th, especially July 16th, when we have the moon go over this point, because the moon, whenever the moon activates it, that's where we are. Luckily, I think we have July 18th. Once we get into that Sag moon territory, we have the sun sextiling Uranus. So the sun's coming around to this point here, and we get the sun sextiling Uranus. We've got Mercury trining Chiron right now here too, so that can help understand some more of the chironic signatures of the first quarter moon. But I like this. It takes a little pressure off, I think, of what, at least just from a consciousness standpoint, of sort of what we just been through with Mars, Uranus, and all the other tension of the planets around that time. What do you think?
Yeah. Which aspect are you referring to specifically?
Sun Uranus sextile.
Yeah, I mean, that's another opportunity to be able to remedy something that had been fallen into disrepair in the past, to be able to ask questions of scarcity versus excess, and to move forward in a way that could be helping us to find humility. Really, I think that this is a humbling aspect, especially with Mars starting to separate now. It says, okay, well, we've shown what can happen when we are making too many assumptions, or that we're trying to force our way through some sort of situation. But if we surrender to the process, whatever that may be, that can help lead to a better outcome potentially.
I can't help but think seeing this sextile coinciding with the Sag moon with the conjunction of a certain someone we were just talking about their moon conjunction. So I don't think that story's going away quite yet.
No,
But the humbling might not happen till Capricorn, to be honest. But
yeah, that's
but we're on the
it's
lead up.
exhausting.
I mean, yeah. So we are on the lead up, and we're gonna feel it in the world because we're getting to this very potent full moon. So let's keep carrying on, because this is so basically we're gonna have Mars sextile Neptune, which I love how all these planets, they like leave the signs and they get this moment with Neptune before they ingress somewhere
Right.
else. But I mean, here we honestly might just need a break from everything.
I hear you.
Our sails are a little deflated.
And everybody, right? Collectively, like, I think that, I mean, here's the thing. Like, if things are going in a chaotic direction publicly or with the masses, it's even more important to have inner equilibrium and inner peacefulness, so that if you are faced with taking action during times of crisis, that you're able to take a well-considered, well-balanced action rather than one just based on chaos and fear.
Yeah,
Super
absolutely. Absolutely. So we are getting to this space of just Neptunian energy in general. Mars sextile there. The sun is going to be trining Neptune within the full moon we're going to be talking about here. And so we're going to go to that full moon in 1 second and pretty much end the season here. But before we do that, we really just have to quickly talk about Mars and Gemini. Because
Yeah.
Mars moving into a new sign is always a big deal. And so that's going to happen on July 20th, where I'm near my Mars return here. But I mean, Mars and Gemini, it's especially with Jupiter there, being present with Jupiter. I think the Gemini zone and just the overall, this is when all like the flame is going to hit the news and the talking sphere and just our own minds. Like this is a very sort of combustible, anxiety ridden energy. I just living with it personally. But I mean, what do you think about Mars and Gemini?
I mean, I think that Mars likes to utilize whatever weapons that it's being provided for. In this case, Mercury is providing pride, number one, from Leo.
Yeah.
It's also providing just utilizing the weapons of words and ideas and thoughts. So you could just see a weaponization of speech. So a lot of rhetoric could be happening around this period of time potentially, which is, as we've seen, can be dangerous. I mean, that's something that we've been trying to reconcile with as a culture in the past few years, is how do we deal with dangerous rhetoric, with hate speech, and the division that happens when people express themselves in these really severe ways. So I would say be very careful about how you express yourself during this period of time. Try not to allow pride to make you lash out in a way that could be detrimental to yourself and your relationships.
Yes, because you know what Mars and Gemini loves to do, can't help but do?
Yeah.
Debate.
Yep.
It's just we're devil's advocate. We see it all sides. And I don't know if anybody else out there with a Mars and Gemini like myself, it's like you can't help yourself. It's just in your nature. And it's not because, even sometimes it's not even because you're like mad or want to be contested. It's just part of the drive to continue the
Sure.
And this probably makes sense a lot too with just the energy that's going on in the US. We're going to be getting into debates and leading up to the
Yeah, is that when's the first debate scheduled? Is it around this period of time?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't keep up with it too much, but it wouldn't surprise me if it I mean, we're going to have 2 months of Mars in Gemini, right? Roughly. So
Yeah,
maybe
election
even
season is super stressful for me. I like the fact that we have elections, and I'm supportive of free and fair elections, but the lead up and the rhetoric it's hard on a sensitive Cancerian heart. You know, it's hard on everybody on some level, because it seems like the division becomes more and more pronounced in differences of opinion, differences of belief. It's something that I find I very much dislike the lead up to elections.
Yeah, it's tense. There's a lot going on. It's noisy.
Yeah.
It's confusing. It's especially when
Yeah.
you don't have good candidates. It seems pretty
Exactly.
futile.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But
this
I
really
do think it's
Mhm.
important to vote. So I think voting is
Yes.
still important, even if you're disillusioned with the system. Exercising your right in a democratic system is still very, very important, in my opinion.
So I think Mars and Gemini, if we didn't already feel it from the Mars Uranus kind of kicks it off. Mars and Gemini is going to perpetuate because um here we have this full moon that I'm talking about at 29 degrees and 8 minutes of Capricorn. As you can see on the chart, the luminaries are flowing with Neptune. That's the closest aspect there. But we also have Mars trining Pluto, and we have Mercury ruling that Mars, squaring
Hmm.
Uranus.
Ooh.
So this is, and we're talking about these anaretic degrees. So these are these. This is a huge culmination point of not just. It is not a new story. This is an old thing. This is like. This is something to me. It feels like this is something crusty that is like dislodged and like really.
Sure.
Yeah. There when in the political sphere, absolutely it's going to get intense here, but in our own lives, you know, with this Cancer Capricorn story, what do we got? So we got the moon moving basically to trine Neptune, then to trine Mars, I believe, and then it conjuncts Pluto as far as the sort of the lineup with the energy. So it's really activating this Mars Pluto zone. And yeah, and then Mercury, Uranus, like, dare I say there's like an element of chaos to this to me. I feel like it might not it could be literally in the world, but it could be just within ourselves. Like there is just an intensity of transitional energy. There's the pivoting, the extreme pivots of the cardinal, and then there's the intensity of the mutable Mars and Jupiter, but then there's the fixity and the combustible like I almost think of like a migraine with Mercury and Uranus going on together. But maybe I'm just being reactive right now. Maybe.
No, I mean Uranus. It never ceases to amaze me how that planet can still surprise us as even as astrologers who see it coming. Like there's always moments when I'm like, wow, I didn't see that manifestation coming. You know, it's so we could definitely see things of that nature. I mean, the moon in this area of Capricorn it is more related to bureaucratic systems and thrones of power.
Yes.
Okay, so that's important that we'll see something coming to a head, and with it being so close to Pluto, it's showing the corruption in our leadership and in people who have or had assumed thrones of power. Um, you know, and with the sextile to Neptune, just a confusing time as well. The previous mentioned former leader is a master of subterfuge and gaslighting. So like intentionally trying to confuse people through bending what our collective truth. So that could be thrust into overdrive at this point. And again, I'm not looking forward to this time at all. Like this is a period where I'm like, can we just skip over this? Like, right? But that's
Yeah.
not how it works, and
That's not how it works.
we all have to kind of deal with circumstances in our lives that we might not feel comfortable with, or that make us have to face hard truths and hard realities about not only ourselves, but our systems, our leaders, etc. Yeah, there's a lot going on for sure.
There is a lot going on. It makes me think too, just sort of the signature that I was talking about, or with the first full moon, and seeing the shifts in the economy, or maybe the job place, or to me, this feels like it could also be, when we think about big shifts of companies taking place, and maybe certain mergers or layoffs, and especially
Yeah.
with Neptune involved and Mercury squaring Uranus, where you on the back burner, you kind of saw it coming for a long time, and then it's finally here, sort of thing. um I think that might be a destabilizing component of how certain systems and corporations are shifting right now too, and sort of the power dynamics of obviously the sun, who's going to move into Leo and then oppose Pluto. And I was just wondering, I'm like, was it last year? Last year did we get, so this is our first actually sun opposition to Pluto in Aquarius, because last year it was at 29 degrees of Cancer. So this is also an introductory to this is an introductory, other than the sun square that we got earlier this year, because even the sun Pluto conjunction back in, before Pluto moved back into Aquarius, was at 29:59 of Capricorn, right? So this is like
Yes.
the first well, I mean, other than the square, I guess we'll say it's the second rendition of Pluto and Aquarius, and receiving these hard solar aspects, where obviously power dynamics and the king, we think about the Leo, sun Leo is involved here. So this is a 10, we have a tense moment bringing us into Leo season, to say the least. And a life-changing one at that. We're going to feel it in the public sphere, but there's no way that we get out of it within ourselves. We are talking about more political stuff at the moment, but these are huge pivot points in our own stories, and changes of mind or new information Uranusing us in, and then we're shifting and we're pivoting and we're transitioning, and there's an intensity of anxiety probably around with all the Uranus action, Mars and Gemini, the trine to Pluto. So I guess what I'm saying is, care for yourself, care for your people, get flexible and ready to move and roll with the changes, because this is a meaty portion of 2024.
And I mean, the public is always reflected in the personal too. So I think that there are always microcosms of the macrocosmic, thing that's playing out in the news cycle, in our societies, etc. So there are going to be challenges with who are you within these new requirements, like with Leo Sun, opposing Pluto. Like we're being asked to make some collective choices, especially when it comes to things like climate change. We're being asked to make some choices in service of helping each other rather than self-serving. And those are going to change our way of life in a lot of ways. Some of those changes might be uncomfortable for a period of time. So, but I think at the end of the day, Pluto's going to teach us that we do need each other. And I hope that's what Cancer season teaches us too, is that kindness wins. Some of those aspects have me skeptical, but I think it's important to maintain hope and maintain your integrity, even when everyone else is losing their head and losing their own integrity. You can make a different choice in that moment, and you can add kindness to the world rather than adding to the rhetoric. That's something that I'm committed to, is just committing to sharing beauty, sharing hopefully kindness and grace. I fall short of that ambition sometimes, but it's always in the back of my mind that I try to return to that, even if I've gotten off track.
I mean, we can't be perfect all the time.
Sure.
Yeah. So, well, this brings us to our one word. And my word already kind of came up right now, so I'm just going to say it and then ask for yours. But I'm really
Yeah.
thinking about nourishment.
Mm.
Like the question of nourishment, with all these dynamic changes that are happening and these shifts taking place, and getting in touch with what nourishes us personally, what nourishes the people around us, what nourishes the world, and how we can take part in that nourishment, so that we don't feel the lack and we don't feel the the wind just whipped up. It's like, whoo. Yeah, so we because that we have the power in our hands to nourish ourselves and those around us, and sometimes we have to get clever in that, and sometimes we have to be present with that, and sometimes we have to be emotionally mature. That's a good Capricorn moon thing, mostly
Mm.
mature and emotionally you know intelligent, so that we know what that looks like for ourselves and others. So
And
yeah.
staying curious, right? Staying curious so that you don't make those assumptions, like bringing it full circle. A lot of the diversion that we have with each other is because we make all sorts of assumptions about how other people think, feel, act, etc. And when you have a lot of confusion in the messaging that you're receiving, it's even more important to have real, you know, uh, conversations with people in your life, you know, that you care about, that you interact with on a daily basis, rather than making it an either or black and white issue, like a severe contrast. There are definitely ambiguities that we need to live within and we need to accept. Sometimes there isn't always a clear answer to a problem. Sometimes there are many multifaceted layers. And I think being okay with that, I think is super important. If I had to have a one word for this season, I think it would be intuition. I think that being able to trust your intuition and that place in you of knowing, even when your mind may be cycling around and around and around and around with anxiety, fear, or questions, there is a wisdom that comes from the body that is not necessarily connected to that chattering mind. And I think it's really important to get in touch with that during Cancer season. Um, and I think that'll guide you. I actually pulled an animal for our thing today for Cancer
Oh.
season. I got the deer, and it's the perfect
Oh.
Cancerian animal. It's a lunar animal, sacred to the lunar goddess Artemis. And it's a pathfinder. It's trusting your intuition to help lead you through the woods, even if it's hard to see where you're going. It also is a very gentle animal. So being able to cultivate our gentleness is, I think, a really important direction that will lead us back to our home, back to our center.
Oh, the deer's gonna lead us home. I love the
That's right.
deer. Yeah, that's just gotta go off our instincts. Follow the
Mhm.
deer. Follow the white deer into the forest. I don't know. I'm just
There
my
you go.
Cancer imagination's kicking up now. But
Sure. Sure.
all right, Spencer. Well, I think we've done all we can for Cancer season this year, and what a season it shall be.
Mm.
So, everybody take care of yourselves. And so where can people find you? What do you got going on?
Yeah, I'm over at spencermichaud.com. That's my website where you can find me. You can book readings. I do have a class offering that is still active right now for a book club or a guided group study that I'm doing. We're reading a book called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which is talking about how to connect with indigenous wisdom and plants, and how to the stories that shape all of those types of experiences. And we're grounding that in the circle of the year, and how the astrology of the turnings can help us understand how to stay grounded and connected with nature. It's an incredible book. I'm really excited about it. Yeah, you can find me also over at YouTube, Spencer Michaud Astrology. I do a weekly live stream, usually on Friday afternoons. So you can check that out. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Spencer Michaud.
Well, your live streams are going to be pretty active with all the lunations taking space on, on those, I
That's true.
think.
That's true.
So you'll get Spencer real time if you want to hang out during the lunations. So all right. Well, I love the book club, by the way. That sounds, I feel like, for the record, I did not do Mars and Gemini justice. I don't want to poo-poo Mars and Gemini completely, because I live it. There are wonderful things about it. It feeds the intellect and it feeds the curiosity, and it
Sure.
keeps the Peter Pan in you alive. But so just in the essence of saving time, we didn't have a whole lot to talk about Mars and Gemini, but I just want to say that it's not all bad. They're wonderful things. And you know what? Mars and Gemini lives is probably a book club. The most active participant would be the Mars and Gemini.
Yeah, and this is a great one to help keep us grounded in some of these maybe anxiety producing times. It's showing us that if we connect with the grounded earthy part of ourselves, that nature will provide. Nature will provide the resources that we need. It'll provide the peace that we're looking for. It's cultivating some kind of harmonious kind of exchange, and seeing ourselves as part of it rather than as a resource, or as us having dominion over it or something like that. Yeah.
We are it. Don't
Exactly.
forget that. We
Exactly.
are it. Well, speaking of nature, we have Tarot of Her, which is based on
Yay.
the plant life
awesome.
cycles and what have you.
Congrats.
Thank you. See, look, Mother Nature. What
Nice.
do I say here?
Beautiful.
We are all her children. Our decks just set sail and they are coming our way, which is huge. And so we're going to be fulfilling orders for our Kickstarter in July, probably right around my birthday is when they're going to arrive. Right as I go into my 10th house, sun perfection year. It feels very appropriate.
I love that rainbow
yeah.
lettering. It's
You like
gorgeous.
that rainbow holographic?
It's nice.
I'm leading you in like a crow. I'm like, come on, there are still pre-orders left. Would you like a deck? There are only a few left.
Nice.
But if you would like a deck, we are still doing pre-orders. There's a handful of decks left. You can go to tarotofher.com to order yours. And you can also go to energeticprinciples.com to find me if you would like a personal consultation to navigate some of the energies that we're talking about here, because obviously we are going very general with how it hits personally and also how it hits publicly. But if you want a more specialized connection to your life, I provide both astrological consultations and tarot consultations, and a little combo of the two. What else? You can find me on Energetic Principles at the old Instagrams, but I just do some stories there. I'm not doing too much. I'm not crazy about how starting June 26th it is, I believe it is, how there's going to be this new, I should have talked about this earlier, but there's going to be this new policy on all Meta that we have to sign this new Privacy Act, which basically is giving them free range to use all our posts and our captions and all our what have you to train the Meta AI. And people in the EU and the UK have the option to opt out, but not us Americans. No, we are part of the system and there is no way. So unless you, actually, there's nothing you can do. So get ready for that. But yeah, so I'm becoming really I got a love-hate relationship with it. I like to pop on, see some things that my friends are doing, maybe share a thing here or there, but then I'm like, God, this just doesn't feel right, right? The Cancerian, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And so I'm there, but don't expect me to be there, I guess. But I got a newsletter, so you can find me there.
Yeah. I'm most active on Instagram, but I'm modestly active, not like I'm not posting a ton of stuff, but I'll share a good cat video here and there, or something like that. And
you wonder if he's a Cancer and a Leo rising.
That's true. I love
Insert
cats.
cat video.
That's true.
Funny. All right, my friends. Well, we have talked long enough. We wish you the best during Cancer season. I want to thank you, Spencer, for joining me once again on the program. It's always a joy to connect with you.
Yeah, thank you, Mel. It was a pleasure.
All right, my friends. Well, take care of yourselves. Listen to your intuition. Make sure that you and the folks around you are well nourished. And we'll see you on the other side. And remember, as always, may the stars be with you.